Hi, my name is Zoë Bordes, and this is the story of my 4-week long burner account experiment. So, this is the burner account. The way that I approached this initially was to try to get this as close to my normal Instagram feed as quickly as possible, completely organically. So that means not searching anybody up to follow and going purely off of the algorithm's recommendations and how it develops after I like content and then follow the creators that it recommends to me. Just to note, I've had my regular Instagram account since I was 10 years old, and I'm almost 21 years old. So Meta has almost 11 years worth of data on me and has been curating my feed perfectly and molding it to my preferences for almost 11 years now. With this experiment, it was a remarkably quick process. In the beginning, my Reels and my Explore pages were just full of content that had received an exorbitant amount of likes and comments and interactions. So most of them were funny fail videos or cooking videos or those weird history fact videos, and then finally soccer videos. I do think overall that at the beginning, the algorithm was kind of throwing pasta at the wall, hoping that something would stick, hoping that there would be something that I would kind of latch onto, that they could latch onto in order to personalize and nicheify my account and get me to be scrolling for as long as possible. But the next day, my feed had completely shifted. Soccer, that was old news, and now it was all cooking videos. Eventually, as a result, I think, of this massive cooking videos, I ended up getting a chicken shop date video. Chicken shop date is pretty much the node at which a lot of my interests intersect. And I think liking and following this account was kind of the gateway to my feed showing me Apple Music, and then from there, The Weeknd and things that would get me closer to my normal Instagram account. And so I was able to shape my feed a little bit. It is just weird to think about how quickly I was able to get here at a place that's, only a few days in, when this is content that I've been curating for, again, over a decade. By week 3, it was getting a little bit boring, so I decided to switch gears a little bit. What would happen if I pushed the algorithm in a way that completely contradicted my own preferences? All of the artists that I follow and the individual accounts are publicly left-leaning liberal figures, and so it might be contradicting for a fan of these kinds of people, especially these people who tend to be younger audiences, to go into, the extreme right wing. So as much as it pained me to do so, I hit the search button and I followed Donald Trump and all of the recommended accounts. So that's Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump Jr., Turning Point USA and Charlie Kirk. And I went through those accounts and I sat through their reels, listened to what they had to say, and I liked them and I liked their comments. And my homepage quickly flooded with their content, which makes sense just because percentage-wise, these accounts now made up the majority of the people that I followed. My Explore and my Reel pages, however, were completely unchanged. I was only seeing concert videos and food videos, etc., and no political content whatsoever. There was no political content, there was no QAnon, there was no hot takes. And so this is when I first really felt that the algorithm was completely resisting my efforts. Maybe it knew that I was a fraud. It's possible, because maybe there's that mismatch between the fact that I like these artists that tend to fit the profile of a 20-year-old girl who lives in Los Angeles, and the algorithm might have had, in my head, it's like conflicting options for them to choose from, and they have to choose the most statistically probable next video to show me. And in order to not get my preferences wrong, it's possible that the algorithm just steered away from political content completely in order to avoid risking disengagement on my part. So that's interesting. It definitely goes against my original ideas about the flexibility of the algorithm. There was something that truly surprised me that I just didn't expect to happen at all. But over the weekend, I had finished a book called Onyx Storm. I had finished the book and it left on a cliffhanger, so I went onto my regular accounts, not my burner one, and I was looking up some fan theories or just expectations for how the next book is going to go. When I logged back into my burner account this week, I was very surprised to find out that my Explore page, it wasn't any Onyx Storm specific related content, but it had definitely shifted from food and music to Bookstagram all of a sudden without me prompting it to. I think this has to do with network theory, or just the way that networks work in general. There's these devices that are using the same Wi-Fi and that are in close proximity to each other, and I'm using the same phone to access both my burner account and my main account. Even though logically it makes sense, it's still very unsettling because, I was trying to shape the algorithm, but the algorithm was 2 steps ahead of me, pulling from data that I didn't offer it willingly. And so by this point, I still haven't seen the political misinformation content that I was expecting that I would have received by this point. So I decided to unfollow all of the music and pop culture accounts that I'd been following and limit it to strictly right-wing political influencers. And I added a few like RFK Jr., Kristi Noem, etc., etc. The first reel was promising. It was followed by Turning Point USA and Donald Trump Jr. The content was clearly conservative, so I thought that I'd finally did it. I only needed to only follow political content for it to happen. But then there was an ad for like nipple covers for breastfeeding moms. Then it was more of the viral videos, and then it was another video of, I think it was a cowboy on horseback who was advocating for this horse training package. Things like that. Like my feed just became a lot more family oriented. However, after a little bit, I started seeing more political content, except it was all left leaning. There was a CNN clip, there was a video by Stephen Colbert. So these are going completely against the people that I had chosen to follow. And in those videos, there was zero conservative pushback at all. I would even open the comments and it was all liberal. Hello. Sorry about the really quick cut. I realized how little time I actually have to analyze all of this. So let's get straight into it. At the beginning of this video, I had talked about how it initially felt like the algorithm was throwing spaghetti at the wall, trying to see what would stick. And in my case, the things that stuck were things like music, pop culture, and food. And once I started really interacting with the algorithm and it picked up that I like these things, my feed was quickly beginning to resemble my normal feeds. And I don't believe that this is the result of the algorithm being incredibly malleable or very receptive to change. In fact, throughout this experiment, it felt as though the algorithm was extremely resistant to change. But while I don't believe that the algorithm is very flexible, I do believe that once it has enough data to pick up on, it can kind of lock in its perception of you and then keep you trapped inside of this statistical box. What I mean by this is as follows. So when I first set up this account, Instagram required me to give up certain details like my date of birth, my gender, things like that. But in addition to those data points, the algorithm also has access to my geographical location, and that can be as broad as the USA, as California, as Los Angeles, but it can also be as narrow as my Wi-Fi network and what other devices I have on it, what other users use it. And so all of these various nodes can kind of paint a picture as to the preferences that I'm likely to have. And I'm drawing this from network theory. Essentially, the algorithm can pick up on these patterns, and this is what enables it to provide me with really good recommendations and predictions as to items that I'm mostly going to interact with. Extremely quickly, within only a few days, the algorithm was able to position me into this kind of statistical box. Maybe it was labeled something along the lines of 20-year-old girl living in LA who likes pop music. So halfway through, when I had decided to switch things up and make my account resemble something a little bit more political, the algorithm worked very hard to ensure that I was stuck in this box. It was almost like I was being held hostage by the algorithm. When I tried to pull it in one direction, it would always counter my efforts and pull me back. Even when I was deliberately following, right-wing political creators and engaging with their content, the algorithm wasn't naturally recommending those things to me. I had to actively seek it out for myself. The only point at which it started offering me political content was when I forced it to, when I unfollowed all the other pop and food accounts. But even at that point, the algorithm was still recommending me content that was the opposite of what I actually wanted. So it was really still offering me content that would reinforce that identity that it had assigned to me. What I take away from this is that our algorithm on a certain platform is not solely dictated by our behavior on such platform. It's also, and maybe especially, dictated by our behavior outside of that platform. And so this is exactly what explains the whole Bookstagram thing. If this is true, which it is, that algorithms are able to draw on data from outside of its platforms, then that means that we have extremely minimal control over the content that we're seeing and consuming. These boxes that we're fit into, these echo chambers or these filter bubbles, are probably more accurately termed something like solid spheres. Once the algorithm forms this vision of who it expects you to be based on statistical analysis, in order to really break through that, you kind of have to claw your way out. And so this can be pretty useful in understanding political polarization, because from this project, I saw that people literally aren't seeing any sort of opposing content, anything that would pop their bubbles, unless they really actively search for it. The algorithm isn't going to naturally be recommending this sort of content content. People are just kind of getting cornered into this box. Ultimately, we do still have some degree of control over the content that we see, in the sense that we can easily hit the search bar and we can look things up. But given that our algorithms are heavily influenced by the preferences, behaviors, and algorithms of those around us, it can be extremely easy to find yourself in an echo chamber or a filter bubble in which you're not really challenged and you're not really prompted to hit that search bar and search for anything other than what you've been exposed to. And I'm sure that I've run out of time by this point, so I'm going to end this video here. Thank you so much for watching. Bye! Please give me an A. I would really appreciate that.